Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. Well, joining me and Napoleon Dynamite. It is May 10th, and I just got, just a few quick minutes here that I want to share with you. As you guys know, because I've said this often enough, that I try to read through the Bible every year. And in most years, I get that accomplished. Every once in a while, there will be a year where I don't get it done. I think it was like 4 years ago, that particular year, I didn't get it done. But most years, I get through the Bible. It's kind of a slow process because, I mark in my Bible if I'm reading a paragraph and it's just like my mind drifted, then I'll back up and I'll reread it. And I'm not the world's fastest reader. But what I want to share with you today is just where I've been reading the last couple of days. I'm in the book of Second Chronicles. In fact, this is during the days of the divided kingdom. As you remember, Israel, when they started getting kings, they had King Saul, then King David, then David's son Solomon, and then after Solomon, there was a guy named Rehoboam. And that's when everything split, and we end up with the divided kingdom for the next few centuries, and it never comes back together again. Well, that's where I'm reading right now, is during the days of the divided kingdom. And most of the kings during that time were bad kings. Some of them were good, but most of them were not good. For example, there were some really bad ones. The very first one of the northern kingdom, after it divided, was a fellow by the name of Jeroboam. Jeroboam, he very soon developed a fear that people would end up wanting to go back to Jerusalem and to the worship of God and all of this. And so what he did is he built a couple of gold calves and he started promoting idolatry and just kicked that into high gear. And in fact, Jeroboam ends up kind of becoming the benchmark of what a bad king is. And so many times in the following decades and centuries, people are compared to Jeroboam as far as, how ungodly he was. So he's a bad example. Another horrible example of a king was Manasseh. And yet he reigned, I think it was 55 years. And this guy, I'll just tell you one thing about him, that he really got people engaged in the worship of a false god named Moloch. And the centerpiece of that kind of worship was offering as sacrifice newborn babies. Manasseh was horrible. He had a great dad, a very godly man, but Manasseh just, whoa, he was way off the deep end. Now, late in his life, he did come around and he repented, but by that point in time, the damage had been done as far as decades of influence of countless people. It was Manasseh. He really was bad. Ahab is another guy. You may remember him better by his wife's name, Jezebel. Ahab was big into Baal worship, which is bad enough, but Jezebel, that just made everything 10 times worse. So there's plenty of bad examples of kings during the days of the divided kingdom. But there are some good examples, like Hezekiah. Hezekiah is a guy that it's delightful to read, the account of his reign, and it's inspirational, the things that you're going to see. Or there was a guy by the name of Josiah. Josiah became king when he was only 8 years old, and he reigned for like 30 some years, and there was a real major revival that happened in Israel during Josiah's reign. One of the things that he did while he was still in the first half of his reign, he was still a very young man, is he wanted the temple to be all cleaned up and everything, because it hadn't really been used for true worship for a long time. And in the process of doing that, they discovered the Bible, and so it was read to Josiah, and boy, that really kicked into motion this humongous revival among the people, and it's really cool, when you read about Josiah's reign and the things that were happening. So he was one of the good ones. Well, this morning, what I was reading this morning was about one of the kings of the southern kingdom who was a good king. His name was Asa. very short name, A-S-A, Asa. And he was a good king. In fact, the first verse following the one that says that he became king, in its entirety, it says this: Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He was a good king. He ended up influencing a lot of people to do what was right and to worship God. I mean, those are what the following verses, start talking about. It wasn't very long before the king of the Cushites brought his huge army down against the southern kingdom of Israel, or Judah, as it's oftentimes referred to, and right away, Asa, he starts calling upon God. Here's the way it reads: Then Asa called to the Lord his God and said, Lord, there is no one like you to help the powerless against the mighty. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you, and in your name we have come against this vast army. And so he was very reliant upon God, very quick to call upon God's help, and sure enough, the Lord delivered him in all of that. The prophet of the day, shortly after that, the prophet said this: The Lord is with you when you are with him. If you seek him, you will be found, or he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. Well, Asa took that to heart, and that kicked into motion, some really good things. I mean, he was bound and determined he was going to seek the Lord, and he wanted the people in his kingdom to seek the Lord. And so he had already removed a lot of the idols and stuff like that, but boy, he went the extra mile in doing that. Now he had the temple repaired. Under his oversight, he even removed the queen mother from her position of prestige and influence, because she had erected an idol, an Asherah pole. And so he removed her from her position, and he went out and chopped down that pole. So Asa, when you're reading about Asa, you can clearly see that he was a good king. In fact, it goes on and says, Asa's heart was fully committed to the Lord. And man, what a great description of this guy. But here's part of where the problems come into play with Asa. And this is part of the value of reading the Bible. You can read the Bible and you can get instruction, you can get comfort, you can also receive conviction, for the way that you're approaching life or living life and what you're doing, or perhaps maybe what you're not doing that you should be doing. And so when I'm reading, and I do enjoy reading through these pages during the days of the divided kingdom, and seeing the positives and being inspired by it, but also seeing the negatives and being convicted by that, especially if I see any of that in my own life. And with Asa, there were so many positives. But then, as you read on, before you get to the end of the account of his reign, you start seeing the inconsistencies. And as well as he responded when the Cushites came against him, it was at a later time that the king of the northern kingdom, Baasha, came against him. And immediately the thing that Asa does is he sends a whole bunch of money, gold and stuff like this, up to the king of Aram, who lives in Damascus, and basically says, break your alliance with this Baasha king and fight on my behalf. And so he calls upon him, and this king of Aram, his name was Ben-Hadad. He was not a godly man. And yet here Asa is, just right away, when he has this threat, he calls upon the help of someone that doesn't even know the Lord. He doesn't even call upon the Lord. The prophet comes to him following all of that and says, what are you doing? You should be calling upon the Lord. But you're not. Well, Asa doesn't like hearing that. So what does Asa do? He's a king. He can do anything, right? He takes the prophet and sticks him in prison. That way he doesn't have to listen to that junk. It's like, Asa, what are you doing? I mean, you had done so many good things, and man, what are you doing now? And then the way it closes out, in the second to the last year of his reign, he developed a disease in his feet. Listen to this. I'll just read this. This is 2 Chronicles chapter 16, toward the end of the chapter. It says, though his disease was severe, even in his illness, he did not seek help from the Lord, but only from the physicians. Now you might look at that and you might think, well, that's harmless enough, right? No, it says something about your heart. And it says something about what's lacking in your walk with the Lord. And it seemed like Asa, he had so many high points. He had so many positives that was going on in the chapters that tell his story. But boy, by the time you start getting into chapter 16, you just start seeing the inconsistencies. And I guess ultimately here, for me personally, as I'm reading through the Bible and I come to a chapter like this, the thing I'm not focusing on is a fella named Asa that lived, whatever that was, 700 BC or 800 BC, whenever that his reign was. Instead, the thing that I'm seeing is myself. And that's where the conviction comes into play. Am I doing different, or am I doing some of that same? Are there inconsistencies in my life? I am very thankful for the grace of God. The grace of God. What would we do without it, right? But at the same time, I need to be growing. Each of us needs to be growing in our walk with the Lord. And yeah, there's going to be some inconsistencies. But shouldn't those inconsistencies be on the decrease and not the increase in our life? Yet what I'm reading here is they almost seem like they're on the increase in Asa's life. It was almost like he was starting to get lazy spiritually. Could that be the story in my life at any particular point in time? And if so, what am I going to do about that? You see, this is part of the value of reading through the Bible. The Bible will share words of comfort. Sure enough. It'll share words of instruction. But it'll also share words of conviction, where you read it and it's just like bullseye. It hit me right here. We need to be consistent in our walk with the Lord. Isn't that what we're striving for? For His glory? Yeah. I hope you're reading through the Bible. You may not be reading during the days of the divided kingdom and the accounts of the kings, and that's fine. You might be in a totally different part of the Bible, but this I can guarantee you. If your heart is open, God will speak to you. And He'll bring something that might be words of comfort, might be words of inspiration, words of instruction. They might be words of conviction. But whatever they are, God always has your best interests in mind. Might we tune in to what He's got to say? I hope your week goes well this week as you become a little more consistent in your walk with the Lord, and as I strive to do the same. God bless.